Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Untold Tales from this side of nowhere. I'm your host, Connor Jones, and it is Saturday. That means it's time for another episode of Untold Tales. I'm bringing you another story from about as close as you can get to the middle of nowhere. That is Poverty Flats, Wyoming. Before we get started, here is a message from our sponsors. This week, our sponsor is Basin Pharmacy in Basin, Wyoming. Basin Pharmacy is your hometown pharmacy, as well as your source for over-the-counter medicine, vitamins, and supplements. They also carry office supplies, Russell Stover chocolates, and greeting cards. The friendly folks at Basin Pharmacy are happy to help with any of your medicinal needs, whether you have a prescription to fill or a question about your meds. You can stop in Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Saturdays from 9 a.m. to noon. We are also sponsored by the Wyoming Welcome Program. The Wyoming Welcome Program offers two services to local businesses: Table Talk and the Wyoming Welcome Baskets. Wyoming Welcome Baskets are filled with promotional items for local businesses and distributed to new move-ins to the Bighorn Basin. Table Talk brochures include jokes, facts about the state of Wyoming, the month's holidays, and advertisements from our local businesses. These brochures are placed on restaurant tables in Cody and Powell for diners to peruse. So if you'd like to get your business name out there, please contact the folks at the Wyoming Welcome Program by shooting an email to Haley J, that's HALEYJ, at wyomingwelcome.com. Do you have a noxious weed problem? The team at 307 Pest Management can help. We offer residential and commercial noxious weed management that is safe and affordable. Whether you have a parking lot, a yard, or some production land that needs treated for noxious weeds, 307 Pest Management is ready to help get your weeds under control. Give them a call today for a free quote at 307-250-0614 or send an email to 307pestmanagement@gmail.com. Well, it's been a pretty great week. I have some big news about the podcast in the news. This past week, well, I guess let's go back a couple weeks. I had the opportunity to sit down with a reporter from the Cody Enterprise. Shout out to Daniel if you're listening. Daniel was awesome and had so many great questions about the show. And he wrote a story that was featured in the Cody Enterprise this Tuesday. So that would have been on January 12th. If you check out the life section of the Cody Enterprise or go on their website, he wrote a really, really nice story, a very thoughtful story about the podcast and its progress. And I'd encourage you to go check it out. And just another thank you to all of those of you who have been listeners for the past 3 years that we've been doing the podcast. Without you guys, it wouldn't be where it's at. And you motivate me to keep on writing and publishing stories. And I just want to thank you guys again for all of your support. It was really exciting to get some of that exposure in the newspaper and just have the opportunity to talk with someone about something I'm so passionate about. So go check out the story, and thank you for listening. We're going to dive in with another story today, and this one's kind of special because it's a blast from the past, and it was kind of inspired by the fact that the U.S. Mint has stopped making pennies, and it's kind of sad, but it made me think about this story from the Jones family, and now it's my pleasure to share it with you today. So, here we go. This is called Penny Candy. As a kid, I remember going to Walmart and seeing those candy and toy machines in the entrance. You know the ones. For 25 cents, you could buy a handful of runts, or get one of those little plastic containers shaped like half an egg that had a sticker and a little plastic toy the size of a quarter. Like any kid, I would always beg my mom to let me have one. Mom, can I please have a quarter for one of those candy machines? I would beg. Not today, dear. We're here to buy groceries. But Mom, I'd whine. Don't you mom me, Mom would reply. Did you bring your money? Well, no, but it's only 25 cents. I know it's only 25 cents, but if I give you a quarter, then everyone else will want a quarter. I don't have 6 quarters in my purse right now. How about you bring your own money next time? Mom would say. I would heave an enormous sigh and say, okay, then drag my feet into Walmart. I remember one time. I don't remember if I brought a quarter or if Mom let me have one, but I do remember buying one of those little plastic containers and being overjoyed at its contents. I think my twin brother Fred must have gotten one too, because I have a faint recollection of playing with the toys together. They were just tiny things, but with inflation, I bet they would be much bigger today. I think that's how that works. Nowadays, I don't even know if they do candy and toys for a quarter. It's probably 50 cents or $1. They probably have to put those sliding coin things on the candy dispensers instead of the crank you turn in a circle. Buying a handful of runts is like paying for a laundry cycle. If you've never been to a laundromat, then you probably don't know what I'm talking about. Or if you were born after the year 2000, I suppose. You'll have to go look those things up, I guess. It's funny how I complain about how this has changed so much in my lifetime. But the thing is, for my grandparents, things have changed even more radically. In fact, my Grandpa Jones would tell me sometimes about a time he bought a piece of penny candy. Can you imagine that? A piece of candy for only 1 cent? I wonder what Grandpa would say if he knew they are no longer even minting pennies. Not minting pennies? Back in my day, you could buy a piece of candy for a penny. Grandpa Jones was born 100 years ago this year, and with inflation, a penny in 1926 would be worth about 18 cents today. I'm not sure how big those penny candies were, but for 18 cents, I don't know if I could buy a gumball. Either way, those penny candies must have been pretty good, because the story goes that back in the day, Grandpa Jones was willing to fight someone for a piece of penny candy. Let me explain. When I was a teenager, almost every Sunday afternoon after church, I would walk down to Grandma Renan and Grandpa Myron Jones's house for a visit. It was only a little more than a mile away, a short jog down the dirt lane and a right-hand turn on the gravel road. Then you were at their mailbox and almost in Grandma's dining room. In every season, the walk was refreshing. On summer afternoons, I'd wipe my brow as I kicked rocks that skittered down the dirt road. If I was lucky, a breeze would rustle the leaves on the corn stalks in the field that stretched beside the lane. During the winter, I would bundle up and crunch through the snow, my breath fogging in great clouds as I exhaled. No matter the season, though, the Bighorn Mountains would rise up in the distance with Cloud Peak in the center, Bomber on the right, and Mount Woolsey and the Blacktooth off to the left. Once in a while, the smoke from a late summer forest fire would make it hazy, and it was harder to see the mountains. But my favorite days were the crisp fall afternoons, when the air was so crystal clear you could see every detail, and you just wanted to take a photograph so you would never forget what they looked like. You almost couldn't believe how beautiful it was. And walking on a Sunday afternoon to see your grandparents in the peace and beauty of northern Wyoming, you almost couldn't believe it was real. They only have mountains like that in the movies. You can only find peace like that in a story. I probably didn't think that way back then, but as an adult, It's easy to look back and marvel. I wish I had the perspective afforded of age to appreciate those days like I do now, but if I did, I don't think I could have loved them the way I did in my youth. It's hard to explain. It's said that age makes some things better, but I wouldn't have traded those afternoons for the world, even though I didn't appreciate them quite like I do now. When I reached Grandma and Grandpa's mailbox, I would turn down their lane, tiptoeing over the cattle guard. You don't want to slip into one of those. And then cover the last leg to their house. At the yard, I would open the gate and walk down the sidewalk. Grandma and Grandpa's fence was wire mesh, but not chain link or woven wire. It was a pattern of rectangles, not like any other fence on Poverty Flats, and it did its best to keep critters out of Grandma's yard. Oh, how she and Grandpa prided themselves on that yard. On summer afternoons, you could count on Grandpa being out in the yard with his hoe, pulling weeds from the lawn. Grandma pampered her flower beds like only a grandmother can. Peonies and hollyhocks, gardenias and snapdragons. The pride of her flock was the tiger lilies. They grew tall and green, with a crown of brilliant red-orange, speckled all over with little black freckles. Winter meant there would be snow over it all, and a well-worn path out to the coal heap. Grandma and Grandpa heated their house with an old coal-burning Stoker-matic, and us grandchildren often carried in buckets of coal to heat the house. When I got to the white screen door, I would pull it open and turn the handle on the wooden door. No need to knock. "Hi, Grandma," I'd chirp. "Talofa," she'd say, looking up from her spot in the well-worn rocking chair. Talofa is Samoan for hello. Grandma served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Samoa in the 50s, and she always retained a few words of the island language. Years later, when I would serve a mission, I met a family in Southern California, and the mother was Samoan, the father Tongan. It's no surprise we became very good friends, given who my grandma was. She would have loved to meet them. "How are you?" Grandma would ask. "I'm great," I replied. "How are you?" Sometimes Grandpa would be seated at the table with breakfast spread in front of him, even though it was afternoon. "Grandpa's just having breakfast," Grandma would say. "I'm just having breakfast for lunch," Grandpa would counter. "I had a Boost for breakfast." Boost was the brand of protein shake Grandpa kept by his bed so he could easily grab one when he woke up. In his old age, Grandpa's health was not what it used to be. When he was young, he was up with the sun, but now in his 80s, he had joined the ranks of the late risers. Grandma shook her head and pursed her lips, then turned to me. "There's ice cream in the freezer and pop down the hall," Grandma said. "And I have a bag of saltwater taffy and cookies in the cupboard," she added. "Oh, thank you, Grandma," I smiled. Without fail, Grandma offered a treat to any grandchild who walked through her door. She would have given those people that sell lotion at mall kiosks a run for their money. I learned a long time ago not to resist the offer of a treat, so I rose from my seat by the table and went into the kitchen, returning with a bag of brightly colored saltwater taffy. "I love saltwater taffy," I said, raising my voice so Grandma could hear. She was a little hard of hearing, and you had to speak pretty loudly so she could understand you. "Oh, me too," she said with a smile. "Thank you," I said, unwrapping a peppermint taffy. When you first put a taffy in your mouth, it's usually pretty hard, but they soften pretty quickly and get stuck in your teeth. If you're not careful, they will pull out your fillings. Speaking around a mouthful of taffy, I asked Grandma, "Would you like one?" "Yes, please," Grandma smiled, reaching into the bag from where she was seated in her trusty old rocking chair. Grandma's smile lit up her whole face, including her eyes, and deepened the wrinkles around her mouth. I swear half her wrinkles could be attributed to smile lines. It seemed like Grandma was always smiling. Her white curls were neatly positioned atop her head, and dark blue slacks, as she did most days. "How about you, Grandpa?" I said, returning to the table. Grandpa looked up from the boiled egg he was scooping from the shell and smiled. His thinning hair was combed to one side in a mostly successful attempt to cover the top of his head, and he wore a gray t-shirt and his customary sweatpants. He grinned at me and shook his head slowly. "No, thank you. I'm eating an egg at the moment." He indicated his breakfast with a jab of his spoon. I nodded and smiled, sinking back into my chair. "Man, saltwater taffies are my favorite," I said happily. "They are pretty good," Grandpa nodded. "We used to buy them for a penny, you know." "A penny?" I asked, sucking on the taffy. Grandpa nodded. "You could buy all sorts of candy for a penny." "Well, I don't think you can buy anything for a penny now," I said. "What candy was your favorite? Could you get chocolate for a penny?" Grandpa's eyes clouded for a moment as he thought back. "Well, I think so," he said slowly. "But the candy machines mostly had hard candy. Or gum. It sure was a treat getting some. I remember one time." As Grandpa spoke, the mists of time floated through the room, and it was once again the 1930s in Basin, Wyoming. Grandpa was a little boy, skinny and dressed in neat corduroy pants and a plaid shirt. His shoes were scuffed and worn, and his sandy blonde hair sprouted in every direction. The grocery store boasted electric lights and rows of shelves stocked with neat lines of groceries marching down several aisles. Grandpa's mom, Ida, was dressed in a neat calico dress, and her wide-brimmed hat was perched carefully atop her curls. Beside her, Myron's little brother Freddie was holding on to the edge of her skirt with a chubby little hand. His bib overalls were covered in dirt, in spite of the fact they had been clean that morning when the Joneses left for town. Freddie could probably have been left in a spotless room with wood floors, and his clothes would be covered in dirt in 5 minutes. He had a superpower for getting dirty. A store clerk wearing a dark apron over his starched white shirt was ringing up another customer as Ida surveyed a shelf of canned vegetables. "Mama," Myron said, "may I have a penny?" "A penny?" she asked. "What do you want a penny for?" "There's a candy machine over there. May I please have a penny, Mama?" Growing up on a ranch in northern Wyoming, money didn't exactly grow on trees, but when Great-Grandma Jones looked down into the eyes of her oldest son, her expression softened. "Sure, honey," she said, fishing in her coin purse. The boy's eyes lit up as he accepted the shiny coin. "Thank you, Mama," he gushed. "Thank you so much." No king possessed such a treasure as he now held in his hand. The little round disc of metal was more than a piece of money. It was a work of art. For a moment, the boy just stared down at the coin in his hand, examined every intricate detail of Lincoln's profile. There was the president himself with the words, "In God We Trust," marching over his head, and liberty off to one side. He turned the penny over in his hand and looked at the back. 2 stalks of wheat curved gracefully on either side of the bold declaration, "1 cent, United States of America." 1 cent? That was a lot of money. "Well, go on," Ida smiled, jerking her head in the direction of the candy dispenser at the other end of the store. Young Myron nodded quickly and turned to walk toward the towering dispenser, the penny pressed in his palm. His mother turned back to where Freddie was reaching up to pull items off the shelf. "Oh, Freddie," she said, stooping to wrestle a can of beans from the toddler's hands. Now the boy was on a mission. He had seen other children insert their coins into the machine and turn the silver crank, but he had never done it himself. Suddenly, his heart was beating faster, and he had a momentary doubt about whether he could do this, buy candy on his own. His leather shoes patted on the wooden floor as he approached the candy machine. It was perched atop a black cast-iron pedestal with 3 feet stretching out below it. The candy was clearly visible in all its brightly colored glory through the glass of the dispenser, which sat above his head. Excitedly, he pinched the penny between his 2 fingers and raised it up to the shiny silver crank. With trembling fingers, he slid the penny into the slot. There was a metallic click when the penny made contact with the crank, and Myron shivered with excitement as he slid the coin down into place. Then he gripped the chrome crank in his hand and gave it a turn. Or at least he tried to. Where the crank should have rotated, unlocking a gush of delicious candy, it remained rigidly stuck in the upright position. Myron now had 2 hands on the obnoxious crank, and he grunted as he strained to turn the darn thing. It was kind of hard to grip the little piece of metal, and at face level your leverage isn't that great. Now frustration welled up inside of him. Why wouldn't the dial turn? His penny peeked out at him, Abe's expression grim. Finally, Myron decided he had better get some help. Surely Mom would be able to turn the crank. Forgetting he was in a store and the scolding Mom was sure to give him for running, he turned and pounded back up the aisle to where he left Mom. She wasn't there. "Mama!" Myron hollered. "Mama!" "Myron!" Ida called from around a corner. "I'm over here. Please don't yell in the store." Myron turned a corner around a case of dry goods and saw Freddie and Ida standing at another shelf. The wicker basket on Ida's arm was filled with items, and Freddie had a jar of pickles out and was rolling it back and forth on the ground. Ida was starting to look a little frazzled. The shopping wasn't going well, and it was largely due to the quality of the help. Even in the 1930s, taking kids to the grocery store was a challenge, and her patience was wearing a bit thin. "Mama, my penny got stuck." "It got stuck, huh?" Ida replied, stooping to pick up Freddie's pickles, much to his dismay. "Yes, can you please help me?" Myron replied, his voice full of concern. Ida sighed and straightened up as Freddie began remonstrating the loss of his new toy. "Mama, want it," Freddie cried. "Freddie, Mama needs to put it in the basket. Can you put it in the basket for Mama?" she said, crouching and holding the jar out to the little boy. With chubby hands, he reached out and clasped the jar of pickles, which was nearly as big as he was, and bodily heaved it over the edge of the basket, where it clinked against Ida's other selections. "All right," Ida said, standing back up and reaching down for Freddie's hand. "Let's go see what's got in this penny stuck." Myron led his mom anxiously back the way he had come. When they turned the corner and he could see down the aisle, he looked at the end, where the candy dispenser stood with his penny held captive. A gasp of shock erupted from Myron as he suddenly realized there was someone else standing at the candy dispenser. Another young boy, probably the son of the other patron who had been at the register, was standing there in front of the machine. Myron couldn't quite make out what he was doing, but from this distance, it definitely looked suspicious. Suddenly, Myron had kicked things into full gear, and he tore down the aisle toward the candy machine, bent on protecting his money, and more importantly, his candy. Before his mother could do anything to stop him, Myron had sprinted down the aisle and skidded to a stop behind the little boy, whose back was turned to them. He couldn't have been much older than Myron, with dark hair and bib overalls. Myron thought he looked like a thief, and his activities appeared less than honest. He was fiddling with the candy dispenser's little silver door, and as Myron watched, he raised a hand to his mouth and put something in. "Hey!" Myron yelled, and the boy turned, his eyes wide. His cheeks were full of what Myron could only conclude was his own candy. His instincts took over, and Myron's hands flew up to the boy's face. The kid probably thought he was about to get socked in the kisser, but Myron had other ideas. With the alacrity of a rattlesnake, Myron struck, grabbing the other boy's jaw. Myron had a dog at home, and he had learned how to get something out of an animal's mouth. Myron squeezed, the boy snorting in surprise. Who was this kid? One moment he had been anticipating a mouthful of bubblegum, and the next he was getting his face squeezed by someone he had never met. His eyes bulged as Myron's fingers dug into his cheeks. His lips and teeth parted, and Myron could see a flash of color inside. His candy! The whole thing was going rather quite well until Ida arrived on the scene. Myron! She blustered. What on earth are you doing? Myron jerked his head around to look at his mother, his hand still clamped on the other boy's face. He stole my candy, Mama, Myron blurted. Let go of his face, Ida countered. Reluctantly, Myron released his grip, and the boy immediately clapped a hand to his jaw where angry red fingerprints glared on his cheeks. That ought to teach him for stealing someone else's candy, Myron thought. The other boy, seeing his chance, began chewing as hard as he could. Hey! Myron shouted, but Ida intervened. Dear, I have another penny. It's all right, Ida consoled her son. You tell him sorry. But that was my penny, Myron said sadly. He took it. An indignant finger pointed at the boy, who was now in the process of chewing up Myron's candy. I'm real sorry, the boy said quickly around a mouthful of gum. I didn't know that was your penny. My mama gave me one, but there was already a penny in the machine when I got here. You can have my penny, he said, holding up a coin. Myron snatched at it, and the boy released the coin with a hurt look. Well, gee, you don't have to get all upset, he huffed. Myron, Ida chided, then turned to the boy. That is very kind of you. Thank you. Are you all right? Yes, ma'am, I'm all right, he replied, massaging his jaw. What do you say? Ida cajoled her oldest son, who was examining the penny like an assayer with a gold sample. Myron said, Thank you, I'm sorry. Then, having determined the goods were genuine, he turned and popped the penny back into the slot. Time for that gum. He gripped the handle of the crank and was met with a result frustratingly similar to his last attempt. It won't turn, Myron complained. You're turning it the wrong way, the boy beside him said. What? Myron asked, turning to look over at him. You're turning it the wrong way, he repeated. Here, watch. The boy reached over and gave the crank a counterclockwise turn. The machinery creaked and clattered, and the dial turned. Then a tinkling came down from behind the little silver door, which bounced slightly as something hit it. Myron's eyes lit up, and he turned to the boy, as if asking permission to retrieve his prize. Well, go on, the older boy smiled. Hardly able to contain his excitement, Myron reached up and cupped a hand in front of the door. Then with his other hand he lifted the little hatch. A bright red gumball came rolling out into his palm, and he turned back to his mother. Mama, look, he said excitedly. Yes, look at that, she said, beaming. Thank you, she said to the other boy, who nodded. No problem, ma'am. As Myron and his mom walked back toward the register, Myron chewed happily, his jaw working up and down. That was some good penny candy. Really, Grandpa? I asked. You were going to squeeze that candy right out of him? Grandpa chuckled and spread some jam on his toast. Well, he stole my candy, he said. I'm glad he let you have his penny. I would have been pretty upset, I said. I sure was, Grandpa nodded. And then with a wink he added, a penny's a lot of money. Well, there you have it. Penny candy. I remember as a kid when they suggested discontinuing pennies, and I was pretty against it. But honestly, with inflation, it doesn't make sense to mint pennies anymore. But it is sad to see them go. If you're sentimental like me, then, it's hard to let go of something that's been around that long. And I can't believe how much inflation has caused pennies to devalue. The fact that one used to be 18 cents back in 1926, it's crazy. But I also wanted to add, after writing this story, it's especially special because coming up on the 22nd is my Grandpa Myron's 100th birthday. If he were still living, he would turn 100 this month. So it's definitely good timing to write this story and think about my Grandpa Jones. Sure miss him. Sorry. Well, thank you for sharing this story. If you have a story about penny candy or quarter candy, or you just want to gripe about how inflation is changing things, you can let me know. Send me an email at untoldtalesthepodcast@gmail.com or comment on this episode when it drops on Facebook. As always, it's been a real pleasure sharing another Untold Tale with you. And this has been another episode of Untold Tales from this side of nowhere, where we work twice as hard for half as much and still find time for the important things, like fishing. See you next time, folks.